For more than 3 decades, Johnny Carson was the face of American late-night television. Every night, millions of people sat down after a long day to watch him deliver jokes with perfect timing and a relaxed smile. He made hosting look effortless. The Tonight Show felt safe, familiar, and comforting, like a trusted friend visiting your living room. Carson's calm voice, quick humor, and smooth handling of guests gave the impression that nothing could ever go wrong. But behind the scenes, the show was not as peaceful as it appeared. Producers, writers, and staff members later revealed that the environment was often tense and carefully controlled. Carson demanded perfection, and when things did not go according to plan, the consequences were quietly hidden from the public. From the very beginning, he understood that live television was dangerous. One mistake could damage his image, so anything that threatened that image had to disappear. One of the most disturbing stories from the early years involves what many insiders describe as a lost episode. According to people who worked on the show, there was a night when everything fell apart. The audience was seated, the band began playing, and Carson walked out as usual. But soon after the show started, something went very wrong. Accounts differ, but several staff members claimed a guest became emotionally overwhelmed on live television. The situation reportedly became so uncomfortable that Carson struggled to regain control of the room. Some people said shouting broke out, while others said deeply personal information was revealed that shocked everyone present. Whatever happened, it was serious enough that NBC executives allegedly made a rare decision. The episode was never aired again. There were no reruns, no official transcripts, and no mention of it in network records. Over time, the story became a quiet legend among television insiders. Carson himself never spoke about it. When asked years later about unusual moments on the show, he changed the subject or made a joke. That silence only made the mystery stronger. This was not the only time producers stepped in to protect Carson's image. In the early years, several interviews were edited heavily or never rebroadcast because guests went off script, challenged Carson, or said things that made the host uncomfortable. Carson liked control, and when guests disrupted that balance, they often paid the price by never being invited back. Writers have said that Carson had an incredible memory and rarely forgot a slight. If a guest embarrassed him or made him look weak, their future appearances were quietly canceled. Viewers at home never noticed. To them, the show flowed smoothly night after night. But behind the scenes, producers worked constantly to manage Carson's moods and protect the brand. Carson's need for control also affected his staff. Writers were often nervous during meetings, knowing that one bad joke could end their job. Producers carefully selected guests who would not challenge him. Even small mistakes were treated seriously. While Carson could be warm and generous at times, he could also be distant and cold. Many staff members described walking on eggshells around him. This atmosphere created tension that never reached the audience, but shaped everything that happened on the show. These early hidden moments laid the foundation for a pattern that would continue throughout Carson's career. When something threatened his authority or public image, it was erased, forgotten, or rewritten. And as his power grew, so did his ability to make uncomfortable moments disappear. As Johnny Carson's influence grew, so did the number of relationships that quietly fell apart behind the scenes. One of the most painful and well-known examples is his falling out with Joan Rivers. For over 20 years, Rivers was more than just a guest on The Tonight Show. She was Carson's trusted performer, and one of the few comedians he truly supported. He gave her early opportunities when others would not, praised her openly, and helped make her a household name. Rivers admired Carson deeply and often spoke about how much his support meant to her. To the public, their relationship looked strong and unbreakable. But behind the scenes, Carson believed strongly in loyalty. In his world, trust was everything. When Rivers accepted an offer from another network to host her own late-night show, she did not tell Carson right away. She feared the deal might fall apart if word leaked too soon. Unfortunately, the news reached the press before she could speak to him personally. Carson felt deeply hurt. To him, it was not just a business move. It felt like a personal betrayal. When Rivers tried to explain, Carson reportedly ended the conversation without listening. From that moment on, he cut her out of his life completely. She was banned from The Tonight Show and never invited back during his lifetime. The punishment was silent but permanent. Rivers later spoke about how painful the rejection was, saying that losing Carson's friendship hurt more than losing her show. The situation became even more tragic as her personal life fell apart during the same period. While Carson moved on and never spoke publicly about her again, Rivers carried the emotional weight for decades. Another shocking moment involved singer Wayne Newton, who became a frequent target of Carson's jokes. Carson often teased Newton during monologues, making comments about his appearance and personality. At first, Newton laughed along, believing it was harmless humor. But as the jokes continued, rumors began spreading that affected his career and reputation. Newton privately asked Carson to stop, but his requests were ignored. Feeling cornered and powerless, Newton eventually confronted Carson in person. According to multiple accounts, he showed up unannounced at NBC studios and demanded a private meeting. The confrontation was tense and serious. For one of the few times in his career, Carson was reportedly left speechless. After that day, the jokes stopped, but so did Newton's appearances on the show. Carson never invited him back. The message was clear. Standing up to the host came at a cost. This pattern repeated itself with other guests who challenged Carson or made him uncomfortable. Some comedians who questioned his authority found themselves quietly removed from the guest list. Others noticed their invitations suddenly stopped without explanation. Carson never argued publicly and rarely raised his voice. Instead, he used silence as a weapon. Being ignored by the most powerful man in late-night television could end a career. Producers were aware of this power and helped enforce it. They protected Carson by managing guest lists and avoiding any situation that could lead to conflict. Viewers at home saw none of this. They only saw smooth interviews and polite laughter. But behind the scenes, relationships were breaking, careers were changing, and emotional damage was being done, all without a single public scandal. Carson's calm image remained untouched, while the people around him quietly paid the price. By the time Johnny Carson reached the final years of his career, he had become almost untouchable. He had survived network changes, cultural shifts, and rising competition. His authority was absolute, and few guests dared to challenge him openly. But there were rare moments when the mask slipped on live television, and producers struggled to contain the damage. One of the most uncomfortable incidents involved actor Charles Grodin, who appeared on the show and openly questioned Carson's behavior on air. Instead of playing along, Grodin calmly confronted Carson about interrupting guests and controlling conversations. The audience grew uneasy as Carson tried to laugh it off. For once, the power balance shifted. Viewers could sense the tension. Producers were reportedly furious backstage, worried that the moment made Carson look vulnerable. While the interview aired, it was rarely rebroadcast, and Grodin's relationship with the show changed after that night. Moments like this revealed that Carson's control was not unbreakable. It simply depended on everyone else choosing not to challenge it. As Carson prepared for retirement, more stories began to surface from former staff members and guests. They spoke about nights when interviews were cut short, jokes were removed, or entire segments were scrapped because Carson felt uncomfortable or disrespected. Some recalled heated arguments behind the scenes that never reached the audience. Others described a man who struggled privately with pressure, loneliness, and the weight of maintaining perfection. Despite his success, Carson was not always happy. Friends said he kept emotional distance from most people and trusted very few. Even as he made America laugh, he carried personal burdens that rarely showed on camera. When Carson retired in 1992, he left behind a carefully protected legacy. NBC honored him, fans celebrated him, and history remembered him as the king of late night. But the hidden moments never fully disappeared. After his death in 2005, historians and fans began searching deeper, uncovering stories that had been whispered for years. Lost episodes, broken friendships, banned guests, and silent punishments painted a more complex picture of the man behind the desk. Johnny Carson was not a villain, nor was he a flawless hero. He was a human being, operating in a powerful position, making decisions that affected countless lives. Producers tried to hide the uncomfortable moments because they feared damaging an icon. But time has a way of revealing what silence cannot protect forever. Today, those shocking moments serve as reminders that even the most polished public figures have shadows behind them. Carson's legacy remains enormous, but it is now understood in fuller detail, with both the laughter and the cost that came with it. Johnny Carson was known for being calm, charming, and in control on live television, but even the king of late night had his limits. One of the most shocking moments in the history of The Tonight Show came when Charles Grodin, a comedian and actor famous for his dry humor, appeared as a guest. Grodin was known for being clever and sarcastic, often making subtle jokes that could make the audience laugh while quietly poking fun at the show itself. That day, however, things went differently. What started as a typical interview turned into a tense and unforgettable confrontation. Early in the segment, Grodin made some casual jokes, but midway through, he asked Carson a question that stunned everyone. "Do you even care about your guests?" The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. The audience fell silent. Carson, known for his quick wit and playful comebacks, froze for a split second before replying sharply, "Of course I do." The tension, however, didn't end there. Grodin pressed further, questioning whether the interviews were sincere or just a way for Carson to remain in the spotlight. He implied that Carson cared more about himself than the people sitting across from him. The room was filled with disbelief. Nobody knew if this was part of Grodin's act or a real challenge on live television. Carson's usually calm voice became clipped and defensive, his expression tightening. He wasn't accustomed to being questioned. especially not on his own stage. The segment ended with forced applause and nervous smiles, but behind the scenes, the producers were in shock. Some suggested cutting the segment from reruns, worried it revealed too much of Carson's real temperament. Carson, however, refused. He reportedly said, "Leave it in. People should see it." This moment was rare. For once, Carson wasn't in complete control. He showed that even a legendary host could be human, defensive, proud, and occasionally uncomfortable. The Grodin incident became a lesson in the unpredictability of live television. It proved that even carefully rehearsed interviews could turn into raw, real, and shocking moments. Years later, television historians would cite this as one of the most revealing interactions in Carson's career, demonstrating that behind the laughter and charm, there was a man who could be pushed, challenged, and caught off guard. It wasn't just a funny interview anymore. It was tension, drama, and an unforgettable glimpse into the private side of one of television's greatest entertainers. Live television often carries the risk of chaos, and few moments in late-night history illustrate this better than the night Shelley Winters and Oliver Reed appeared together. It was 1975, and both actors were on the show to promote their new projects. Reed, a British actor known for his unpredictable behavior and heavy drinking, had a reputation for pushing boundaries. Carson expected some trouble, but certainly not what happened next. As the interview began, Reed grew increasingly rude, making sexist and crude remarks about women in Hollywood. Some of his comments targeted Shelley Winters herself. The audience laughed nervously, unsure if Reed was joking or just being offensive. Winters, a seasoned actress who had spent decades fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, initially tried to ignore him. But as Reed's behavior became louder and more offensive, Winters finally reacted. Without warning, she picked up her drink and threw it straight into Reed's face. The audience gasped, and Carson looked completely stunned. Reed froze, dripping wet, while Winters calmly crossed her legs and said, "That's for every woman you've ever insulted." The energy in the studio shifted instantly from playful banter to raw confrontation. Carson, usually quick with humor and charm, looked genuinely speechless. The producers debated cutting the segment from reruns to protect Carson's image and the network's reputation, but the moment had already gone down in history. Some parts were cut when the episode aired again, but those who saw the unedited version never forgot it. Years later, Winters laughed about the incident, saying she had no regrets, while Reed never apologized and never returned to the show. This shocking moment highlighted a truth about live television. No matter how controlled the setting, anything could happen, and sometimes the most memorable moments were unplanned and unscripted. Carson himself learned that even the most carefully managed environment could collapse in seconds, and he began to treat live interviews with a heightened sense of unpredictability. The Winters-Reed incident became a legendary story, passed down by television historians, actors, and fans alike. It wasn't just about comedy anymore. It was about human behavior, confrontation, and the tension that can erupt when strong personalities collide. Live TV could be funny, chaotic, or downright shocking, and this moment proved all three. Not all shocking moments on The Tonight Show came from arguments or confrontations. Sometimes, chaos arrived in the form of animals. Johnny Carson loved lighthearted segments featuring exotic creatures brought by zookeeper Joan Embury. These appearances were usually fun, unexpected, and full of laughter. But one night in the 1970s, things went terribly wrong. Joan entered the stage holding a small monkey. Everything seemed normal until she tried to hand the monkey to a guest sitting next to Carson. The monkey suddenly lunged and grabbed the guest's hand, causing screams from the audience and a wave of panic. Carson tried to maintain control with humor, but the situation worsened when another handler brought in a large snake. The snake slipped from the handler's grip and slithered across the stage under bright studio lights. For the first time, Carson's composure broke. He jumped back from his desk, visibly frightened, while crew members rushed to contain the animals. The audience gasped, cameras continued rolling, and for almost a minute, one of television's most polished productions descended into complete chaos. Producers considered cutting the segment from reruns, worried it might harm Carson's image, but he reportedly refused, understanding that audiences loved seeing moments where even the greatest host could be unsettled. This story became a cautionary tale about the unpredictability of live television and the need for careful planning, especially with animals on set. Another infamous story involved an urban legend that circulated for decades. Actress Zsa Zsa Gabor